Hello, everyone. It's me, Jim Mundy, the historian for the Union League Legacy Foundation, and you are watching another episode of Mondays with Mundy. And if you've watched any of these episodes since April of 2020, so we're almost 3 years old, you know that I like to connect historical dots. And so today's episode is being broadcast on Monday, March 27th, which it turns out is the 128th anniversary of the approval of the first municipal flag in America. And it was Philadelphia, and it was a Union League member who designed it and then proposed it to the mayor of Philadelphia, who it turns out was also a League member. Surprise, surprise. So this is the story of how Philadelphia got its flag, the first municipal flag in the United States. So let's dig into the story, shall we? And that means I'm going to share my screen. And if I do it competently enough, I got it right, come on. There we go. Now I do one more thing up there. And here we go. Oops, how the heck did that happen? All right. There we go. That's where it should have started. Don't know why it didn't. All right, so Henry McCook and Philadelphia's flag. All right, here we go. So before we had flags, we had seals, not surprisingly. And so the first seal of the city of Philadelphia is what you see on the left-hand side of the screen, but that is actually William Penn's personal seal, but he used it for a city seal. And you can see it was dated 1683 because that's the year that King Charles in England signed the city charter. Now, 10 years later, and again, ignore the date at the bottom, it's wrong, and it was proven to be wrong much later in history, but it was 10 years later in 1693 that the next seal came along, and that's what you see on the right-hand side. And so it is a quartered shield, upper left-hand corner, the clasped hands, upper right-hand corner, the wheat sheaf, lower right-hand corner, the ship on the sea, and in the lower left-hand corner, the scales of justice. And these things would come back in future seals. So let's take a look. All right. So from 1693, we go to 1789. But there is unfortunately no image of that 1789 seal. So instead, we have this absolutely beautiful painting done by Thomas Sully in 1821 of the city's coat of arms. And here we go. So we have the center shield again. And it is divided across the middle by a fess, F-E-S-S, that's the terminology. Above it, we have the plow. Below it, the ship under full rigging. And then above it, we have the arm holding the scales of justice. And the shield is flanked by two female figures that are known as supporters. So on the left-hand side, the female figure is actually holding the first official map of Philadelphia, designed by William Penn's civic engineer, Thomas Holme. On the right-hand side, we have prosperity, and you can see the cornucopia just producing its prosperity at her feet. Wonderful painting, isn't it? Gorgeous. So this would be turned into the next official city seal, which was done in 1874 by Lieutenant Colonel Frank Etting, who came from one of the most prominent colonial Jewish families in Philadelphia. Colonel Etting was a Civil War veteran and held many positions in the Army. But most importantly for our story, he decided to redesign the seal in 1874, and this is what he did. So he kept the basic figures that you can see here. So we have the shield again with the center fess, plow, ship, and the arm with the scales of justice above it. We have the supporters, but there is a difference here because the left-hand supporter is now holding a scroll with an anchor on it. And an anchor in Victorian times, as it is today, was a symbol of hope. So there's that. And then the supporter on the right-hand side is still the prosperity, right? And there is the cornucopia itself still at her feet. But the big difference here is that Etting added that ribbon underneath it, if you will. And you can see the words Philadelphia, Manitou. And they mean Philadelphia, Greek, city of brotherly love, as we know, right? Manitou, to continue. So we have a combination of Latin and Greek, and together they combine to mean brotherly love continues, or to continue brotherly love. All right. So that's the new message, all right, that Etting is trying to get across, right? So there we go. Philadelphia, Manitou. And here we have the hero of our story, Reverend Henry McCook. Now you can see that the Reverend McCook is in his Civil War uniform. Now, Henry McCook was born in 1837 in New Lisbon, Ohio, which is right along the Ohio-Pennsylvania border. And in 1859, he graduated from Jefferson College with a law degree, basically. But he was having an epiphany, shall we say, and he decided that the law wasn't for him. Instead, he wanted to have a life of the clergyman. And so he went and enrolled at the Western Theological Seminary in Allegheny, Pennsylvania in 1860. And he would indeed spend the rest of his life as a Presbyterian minister. However, the Civil War interrupted his studies. And at this point, he is serving as a curate in Clinton, Illinois, at a Presbyterian church. And when the Civil War begins April of 1861, and the first bull run July 21st of 1861. And in that battle, one of his cousins was killed. And that prompted McCook then to enlist in the 41st Illinois Infantry Regiment as a chaplain. And he would stay with the regiment for the rest of the year, but he would resign from the regiment because he discovered that the officers of the regiment were actually taking fugitive slaves who had crossed the Ohio River into Illinois and were basically selling them back into slavery into Kentucky. And so he left the army at that point in time and would never return. However, though, there were 13 McCooks total between his immediate family, that is his father and his brothers, and an uncle and his sons. So 13 McCooks fought in the Civil War and became known as the Fighting McCooks of Illinois. Okay, so in the meantime, Henry ends up at a church in St. Louis, and he will stay there until 1868, when he is invited to become a minister at the Tabernacle Presbyterian Church in Philadelphia at 37th and Chestnut Streets. And that is how Henry ends up here. So let's take a look. Now, this is Henry McCook. That is, he is a young man on the left-hand side, very handsome young man. Now, he did get married, by the way, when he was studying at Western Theological, and he would have two children, a girl and a boy. His daughter Magdalena would come to Philadelphia, but his son would end up going to Michigan. So, and then you see the Reverend McCook on the right-hand side as an older man in a much more serious pose, but in his robes as a Presbyterian minister. And this is the Tabernacle Presbyterian Church at 37th and Chestnut Streets, designed, not surprisingly, by a League member, T.P. Chandler, Theophilus Parsons Chandler, in an English Gothic style. And the building is still there, and it is still a church, Presbyterian church. So anyway, here we go. And there is Reverend McCook. Now, besides theology and religion, Reverend McCook had two other real passions in his life. One was seals and heraldry, and the other was entomology, that is the study of insects. And so he would become one of the foremost experts in America on ants and spiders. Now, he would join the Academy of Natural Sciences in 1875, and in 1882 he was made the vice president. And by the end of his life, his career, he would have written over 100 books and articles on the lives of spiders, and specifically ants themselves. That seemed to really get his attention. So he was a world-famous entomologist. But in the meantime, he was also becoming equally adept at seals and heraldry. And he had an amazing collection of seals, personally, from both secular and ecclesiastical examples, heralds as well. And the collection was so big that the Philadelphia Inquirer suggested it was probably the largest such collection in the world. And so here was a man who was well positioned then to design the first city flag of Philadelphia. Now, all right, so here we go. Edwin Stewart, you can see from his dates, 1853, 1937. He became Union League president in 1906, but then in 1907 became governor of Pennsylvania, and that interrupted his presidency at the Union League, but he would go back and become president later on. But in the meantime, more importantly, he was the mayor of Philadelphia in 1891 and 1895. And that is when he and McCook collaborated, if you will, to create the first flag. Both of them, don't forget, were Union League members. All right, so this is what the Union League looked like at that time period. I think it's always fun to see what the building looked like through time. So it gives us some sense of context, if you will. So that's the Union League. And that on the left-hand side, of course, is Moravian Street, and Sansom to the right. Okay, doke. And then, so October 1894, Reverend McCook writes a letter to Mayor Stewart. And I could tell you what he said, but I think in this case, and this is the first time in the almost 3 years I've been doing this, that I've actually put quotes on the screen. I think it's better. I think you'll remember it better, and I think it'll mean more if you read it yourselves. So let's read it together, shall we? So obviously quoting. So this is in the middle of the letter. So greatly gratified, showing the interest shown last spring in the revival of the ancient colors of Philadelphia, which are blue and gold. I had hopes at the time that this interest would develop into the official adoption of a city flag and ventured to make some sketches. These I forward to you with this communication. Now, luckily for us, this letter is actually in the city archives, and that's why we have it here. Regretfully, though, the sketches disappeared. But let's continue on. The civic flag is calculated to inspire a spirit of civic loyalty. The display's constant use of a Philadelphia city flag would act towards the strengthening of civic pride, precisely as similar as use of the national flag tends to foster a spirit of national unity. So you can see where McCook is going with this. And keep in mind, this is 1894. Philadelphia is probably at the peak of its influence in the country, politically, economically, socially, you name it. I mean, this is a city that is at this point known as the workshop of the world. Here we go. Prompted by this communicating simply by my desire to do my duty as citizen and to contribute as much as in me lies to deepen the hearts of my fellow citizens, pride and love for a city which for a quarter of a century has been my adopted home. So now you can see his motivation. McCook loves Philadelphia. It is his home, and actually it will remain his home until he dies. And this is his way of, if you will, giving back to his city. And the way to do it. So Edwin Stewart, the mayor, would take this letter and the sketches, and he would send them to we had two councils at this point in city government, select and common councils. They in turn would relegate the decision to the committee on the July 4th celebration. And they actually had one back then. And on December 6th, that committee returned a proposal for an ordinance for the city flag of Philadelphia and colors. And the councils would then debate it. They debated it 3 times. And then at the end of that period, on March 27th of 1895, Edwin Stewart signed the ordinance into law. And that was how Philadelphia got its first flag. And that's how the country got its first municipal flag. Pretty good stuff, if you ask me. So, and there we have it. So once again, we have a Unity member at the middle and in the center of Philadelphia history. And that, of course, makes me happy. I know what makes you happy, too. So this is the flag that McCook designed. As you can see, there is basically Colonel Edding's seal in the middle of the flag itself. And again, Philadelphia, Manito. Let brotherly love continue, right? Okay. And we can interpret this many ways. A lot of people think that the colors were chosen because they were the colors of the Swedish flag, but the Swedish flag at this point was fairly, irrelevant to Philadelphia history because the Swedes were there in the earlier part of the 17th century. And we'll never really know. There was no documentation, at least that I could find, that says that's why these colors are in the flag. But nonetheless, so let's take the center gold. It's golden, actually. That is the color that was chosen by McCook. And perhaps that represents the city lying between these two stripes of azure blue, all right, representing perhaps the two rivers, right? The Schuylkill and the Delaware. All right. And that is a flag that we still have to this day. All right. Okay. Now, as I mentioned, McCook died in Philadelphia in 1911, and he's still in Philadelphia. This is his permanent residence. So this is his grave, and it is monumental at the Woodland Cemetery in West Philadelphia, less than a mile away from the church where he spent his life from 1868 until 1911. So it's appropriate that he is buried in West Philadelphia. Now, how much influence did McCook have? Do people still have pride in the Philadelphia flag? Did Cook actually get that right? I think he did. So here we have 2 photographs from an organization. It's a nonprofit called Partners for Civic Pride. And the lady you see on the left-hand side, Brenda Exxon, helped create it a little over 10 years ago. And like McCook, Brenda is not a Philadelphian by birth. She was from Nebraska. She's a retired school teacher, but she somehow caught McCook's fervent fever about this Philadelphia flag and the pride that it could produce in our great city. And so she has been promoting the Philadelphia flag for over 10 years now. And I've seen her in that dress. She made it herself. It is magnificent. It is something to be seen. You cannot believe it. And I love the way she has two different colored shoes, right, to represent the colors in the flag itself. And of course, and Brenda goes to sporting events, municipal events, concerts, anywhere that she can promote her love of the Philadelphia flag and the city itself. And here we have a school where even the kids are learning to appreciate the value of the city flag itself. So that's Partners for Civic Pride, who have really kept McCook's vision alive for all these years. So thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. This one was one of my more favorite ones, I think, because it's such a neat story. And Philadelphia has a great flag, and Philadelphia is a great city. So we'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode of Mondays with Monday. In the meantime, I hope everyone stays well, take care, and we'll see you then. Bye now.